Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. It's Sunday, January 23rd. I have to remember what month I'm in. That's how hectic a week it's been. But I'm here with you again to talk about Vedic astrology, astrology in general, world events, and how it's reflected in the skies above. I've been a practicing meditator for roughly 32 years. In astrology for roughly an astrologer for roughly 31 years, and no 32 years, excuse me, roughly around the same time I started meditating. Like within a year I started studying astrology and actually studying Indian astrology, or Vedic astrology as it's sometimes called, through Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's program. And I also studied with several individuals from India and engaged in a lot of self-study through the years. I'm also a priest or a Swami of the Temple of Kriya Yoga from Chicago, and I'm a Swami of the Kriya Yoga lineage. So that's, and also a Reiki master. So I've been doing this. I'm also a tarot card reader. I've been doing this for a while, and I just wanted to give you my resume before we started into the program. I've been doing this program for about 3 years now, and I also have a YouTube channel. I encourage you to like, share, and join my YouTube channel. Provide me with suggestions about topics I can cover or areas I can cover. I have been planning on releasing a few shorter videos. I've had some personal obstructions to producing more videos, but I have committed to producing at least one video a week, both for Greater New Bedford Cable and for the YouTube channel, and I hope to be producing more. I also hope to be starting a music channel, since those seem to be very popular, number one, but number two, I'm also really interested in music. So it isn't just for the money. I really love music. And I love a lot of artists who really aren't incredibly well known, and I just like to give them a little bit more exposure. So that's in the works. And also, I am planning to start a school relatively soon. That got delayed due to some factors which were essentially not within my abilities to ameliorate. And so within a few months, the school will start. I'm also looking forward to doing some videos with people like Lolita's Untitled Chapter, who I've done videos with before. And again, it's scheduling issues. It's not her fault. It's my fault. And right now I'm sort of like in a little bit of a vice, so I'm just sort of like eking out whatever time I can to do this particular video. But I'm happy to be with you. I'm happy to be talking with you. I'm happy to be presenting to you, and I hope the knowledge I provide to you is good and helps you in your lives. So, but a lot of good things coming. I've been promising that for a while. I have started compiling the book that I've spoken about for quite a while. And so that's a matter of, I think, a few months off. So it's, so things are coming together slowly but surely. They're moving in the right direction, and we'll get there. We'll get there in our own time. Okay. So let's look at the chart and see what's going on. You'll forgive my big face and the chart. I'm going to see if we can open the screen. And you'll see me clicking on and off the share button because in previous videos, I was confronted by this large open space, this large black space on the computer when I shared the chart. So I'm trying to do it a couple of times to make sure the chart actually shares. Otherwise, you see my a little box of myself floating in the corner up here, and you don't see the chart that I'm referring to, which is sort of an interesting concept. It's a little man talking to you through part of the video, explaining things you can't see, but it really doesn't make good entertainment or good knowledge sharing. But again, that's life. And since we have two retrogrades connected with communication, I'm trying to be better safe than sorry. Now, so let's look at the chart for this week. So this week we're going to talk about largely about transits and retrogrades. Okay, so, and I've spoken about this topic several times before. Retrogrades are really fairly common phenomena. They happen, geez, at any one time you can have about half the planets retrograde in a chart, or close to that. It's actually it's not pretty rare, but it's unusual to find every planet going direct. And basically that has to do with our relative position connected with the other planets. So let's say if we're connected with, if we're passing, let's say, Jupiter in the sky, so if our orbit's going faster than Jupiter's orbit, it looks like Jupiter's going backwards. You might have had the experience if you've been in a train station or been in traffic, and you seem to be moving backwards relative to the trains coming in, or to the landscape. And it's a sensation which is a little bit disconcerting, but which is relatively common to us. So the planets never really go retrograde. They never really go backwards. The only points in space that do go backwards in an astrology chart, Vedic or Western, are the north and south lunar nodes. They tend to go in the opposite direction from the other planets, or the other grahas, as they're called in India. And a graha means a Caesar, so it's essentially Seizer. So it's essentially, it grabs destiny and it puts you in that spot. The philosophy behind astrology is actually, Indian astrology relies heavily on reincarnation as a rationale for why we're experiencing the events we're experiencing in life. And so does a lot of Western astrology, to be truthful. But also, there's another principle called synchronicity, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and that is two seemingly unrelated events occur at the same time and seem to have a connection. So essentially, we're not looking at gravitational pull from Jupiter affecting us so much as Jupiter's position in the sky correlating with certain events happening at certain points in time. So it's not a cause and effect, it's essentially a correlation. And correlations are much easier to control than cause and effects. So it's essentially like, let's say you go down to, you go down and you find $1 on the street, or $10, or you win a prize, and all of a sudden a friend of yours gets good news from across the country. The two events aren't connected. Your friend's good news has no direct effect on you finding that money or winning that prize, but they occur at the same time. And essentially, that's what planetary positions are. So planets actually have a lot less control over us than they seem to at first, at least from an astrological standpoint. But they do indicate it's let's say a part of a larger weather pattern. So let's say if it was a hurricane outside, if we're in a shelter, we're not affected all that much. You know, our lights may go out, something may happen, but we're not affected all that much. And the same is true with a planet. If a planet's in a bad place or in a good place, we won't necessarily win the lottery or experience a power surge that'll knock all our camera, all our electricity off, but the correlation is there. So it's not something that can be rationally explained, to be honest with you. It's just something that you take on faith. And Indians believe very strongly in a law of karma. And the law of karma means essentially what you've sown, you'll reap. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they automatically assume the worst is going to happen to them, because they automatically assume the karma is bad. Karma can be good, bad, or neutral. So there may be certain things that you've studied and worked on in this lifetime that you can point to and say, oh, I'm really good at that because I practiced that or I studied it. There are other things that you're not, let's say, so good at because you haven't either been interested in it or you haven't studied them all that well or you haven't understood them all that well or you don't have a natural knack for it. Those are also karmic events. So essentially, when you're looking at a chart, you're looking at these accumulated lifetimes, and Indian astrology believes in hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of lifetimes. And that's all reflected in the current chart. So that's a long way of saying, don't worry, you have more control than you think, but certain things will happen which are essentially beyond your control and how you react to them. Whether or not you use them to get up, brush yourself off, and try again, or whether or not you give up, that's largely your call. It's not the planet's call. You know, the planet essentially just presents circumstances to you. How you react to those circumstances is going to be a large measure of how far you succeed in life, in spirituality, and in other things. So there's a great deal of there's a certain amount of predetermination in a chart. There's a lot of leeway. Okay, so and honestly, I have a big problem with predetermination because of my feelings about certain other Protestant sects that broke off. I think some of the doctrines are just um, punitive, but I don't dislike those folks. I just think I just disagree with the basic philosophy of it. So 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 essentially, everybody has challenges in life. Even a person like Bill Gates or William Branson has challenges in his life. It's not, but they figure out how to deal with them. Um, so so let's look at the chart. We're going to look over here at the rising sign for this chart, and this is what's called an a question chart. This is a question chart, but we're also using it as an event prediction chart. So essentially, and we'll use this to analyze what's going to happen to you over the next week or so too. So the big news in this chart is we have Venus and Mars moving close to each other. And let's see what the end of the week looks like. So let's go to the 28th, October 27th. Sorry. Okay. And this for a reason. And somebody's doing some drilling of it. All right, so on the 29th, Venus goes direct along with the moon. So what that tends to mean is over the next week, Venus in particular will be causing some disruptions or uncertainty in terms of personal happiness, in terms of confidence, in terms of enjoyment in life, because Venus rules over those things. It also rules over romantic involvements to a certain extent. So if Venus is is retrograding in a chart, it makes it a little bit difficult to make up your mind about relationship matters. Venus is moving back towards Mars. That makes it a little bit difficult for people to feel comfortable in relationships. It also tends to make people feel a little bit off balance. So if something hits them, they recover less strongly. But towards the end of the week, Venus will become extremely powerful. And around the 27th, 28th, 29th, as Venus starts to go direct, it assumes a position called stationary direct. And that stationary direct will happen also when the moon is in the same sign with Venus and Mars. So this will actually encourage breakthroughs in romantic relationships, breakthroughs in job matters, breakthroughs in psychology. So there'll be a lot more confidence. People will feel a lot more comfortable in their skin. There'll be a lot more communication. Now, there'll still be some delays in communication because Mercury is going backwards right now. And it'll be going backwards until around February 4th. And around February 4th, it goes direct in Capricorn again. Now, one of the reasons this is important is because Mercury retrogrades tend to give problems with communications just in general. It's a great time to get bargains. I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of people overlook in terms of Mercury retrograde. But it's also extraordinarily confusing in terms of the media. You're going to hear a lot of what I would call bad or incorrect reporting coming out, a lot of what I would call panicky or dire reporting coming out because of Mercury going backwards towards Saturn. So we're stuck right now trying to re-examine election cycles and election laws and things like that. And it's interesting because we're having the Democratic Party cast doubts on the 2022 elections because of things the Republicans are doing at the state level and because of the failure to pass the Voting Rights Act. So it's interesting. We're hearing now again, depending on your perspective, you may agree with them. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't agree with them, but it's interesting that we're having a flashback about issues of fairness right when Venus and Mercury are both retrograde. And there's a certain amount of panic or despair connected with those things as well. So a lot of that panic and despair will tend to loosen up a little bit around the end of March. I think, and again, like I said, I'm not saying that any party is incorrect. I just think this is one of the things that retrogrades tend to do. They remanifest old discussions that were there were topics of contention a few months ago, and now they're coming up as topic areas again. So I think you're going to see a lot of discussions around this around the next 3 months. You're going to see a lot of discussions around government, especially over the next 3 months. And a friend of mine, I think I can call him a friend, James Braha, has spoken about this as being a Pluto and Capricorn issue, that Pluto and Capricorn is causing a lot of disruptions and a lot of the assumption of autocratic power. And while I think that's true, I think the trigger was actually the K2 Saturn conjunction, and also the major planetary periods, and also starting as far back as 2013, we had a Saturn Rahu conjunction in Libra. So that tends to make things. I'm sorry, 2014. That tends to build authoritarian tendencies in a lot of cultures, and we probably won't see a breakaway from that until around 2028 or so, and that's when Saturn enters Aries. But I'm looking at the chart, and again, if we're looking around 6 months in the future, Saturn enters Aquarius. That'll give some broad liberalization, might ease inflation a little bit, but it'll come back into Capricorn around July of 2022. That'll cause, again, sort of a tightening of the economy. It may cause a recession, but I think not. I think it'll just cause a general slowing down. So growth, so we won't have negative growth, which is how we define a recession. Um, and at least from the chart, I think one of the things you're going to see is that this Saturn Jupiter conjunction, when it happens in Aquarius, will tend to make it'll tend to put more focus on equality, especially when it's firm in the fall, and less focus and more focus on humanitarian causes. And also in the springtime, you'll see a general feeling of happiness, but I wouldn't be surprised to see us like fall back into like either some kind of a lockdown psychology or some kind of a recessionary psychology in June to July of this year. I don't think it'll last long enough to be a true recession. Okay, so it's just just things will be a little bit tight. And the other thing we're looking at over here in the chart is Rahu moving out of Taurus and into Aries, and K2 moving into Libra. Usually when that happens, there tends to be, just in general terms, there tends to be a breakup of partnerships. because K2 will make us much more critical of partnerships, much more critical of the people around us. And there'll be separation or anxiety about separation and partnerships. Again, I don't think it'll be quite as bad as what happened in 2017 because the change happened in mutable signs, and a lot of people for so the signs Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo were strongly affected. Libra was strongly affected. Aries was strongly affected, and so pretty much the entire chart was in a state of flux. And I had a lot of people telling me they were getting divorced in between 2017 and 2019 into 2020. But I do think you'll see more escapes or more private time engaged in relationships. I think the pandemic itself has forced a lot of intimacy, which people really aren't comfortable with. And these are essentially signs of that. So we'll have a few months of freedom, and then Saturn will come back into Capricorn again, casting an aspect on Libra right around the time that K2's there. And a lot of relationships will be tested pretty strongly in the summertime. Okay, so that's just a forewarning. Now we're looking at the week globally. Mars is in the ninth house, so there's more aggressive posturing. Mars is also in Mula Nakshatra, which is a very disruptive nakshatra. It's very aggressive. But it's also with Venus, and I think with Venus going direct around the end of the week, that'll stave off the possibilities of really big wars. But I still stick by my idea that there'll be a lot of revolts around the world. That there'll be a lot of what I would call small rebellions for economic issues. Because with Jupiter in Aquarius, people aren't going to. Let's put it this way: governments have been exercising a lot more control than they normally do. There have been reasons for this. There have been, in the minds of governments, good reasons for this. We've had a pandemic. We've had, people are afraid of the disease spreading and people getting sick. I understand that totally. But also, there is a certain limit to how much individuals will feel threatened by that. So again, I'm not saying open revolt in the United States. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that a lot of what's happening is essentially since we're in this Rahu Saturn subperiod in the United States chart, and a lot of other countries' charts have a lot of activity on this axis right here. That over the so Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius. That when Jupiter is getting ready to enter into Pisces, it'll trigger some urges for reform. It's already triggering some urges for reform right now as we speak. And I think what you're going to see is a lot more, especially in countries where there's a wide disparity in income or in access to resources. You're going to see active revolt. And this isn't something I'm encouraging. I'm just saying this is happening. And with Rahu and Aries, there'll be less fear of the consequences. So I'm really looking for most activity to happen in March, but also, at least from the chart, I'm expecting some activity to happen over the next couple of months. especially when Venus enters Capricorn within about, oh gosh, another 20 days or so. And Mercury will still be in the same sign. So it'll tend to be a little bit tough until over the next couple of months until Venus and Mercury enter into Aquarius. And I haven't even started to talk about eclipses yet, but the moon is going to hit an eclipse point by the middle of next week. So you'll probably see some rebellions or some earthquake activity around that time. The other thing, so let's go to the map. So overall, leadership, the sign of leadership is now in the ninth house. Leaders are starting to assert themselves, but there's still a lot of discontent and a lot of discontent with money. The moon is in the sixth house. The population in general isn't happy. Doesn't mean everybody's unhappy, but the population in general is unhappy. And K2's in the eighth house. This is kind of like fertile ground for underground movements developing. Okay, so K2 and Scorpio, as a matter of fact, over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of covert organization going on. And like I said, not just from the right, but also from the left. And I'm not favoring either group, but believe me, if one group's organizing on one side, the other group's are organizing on the other side. It's sort of like the balance of life. And that particular combination will be essentially arguing for what's fair for them. Sun and Mercury and Saturn in the 10th house, governments will continue to be oppressive at least for another 3 weeks or so, okay? So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's going to feel bad to people being oppressed. And finally, Jupiter's in the 11th house. We're seeing a lot of new medications being proposed, a lot of new activities being proposed. This is very good news for the COVID pandemic being resolved within the year. I personally think a large part of it will be resolved by the end of March, but because of the Saturn retrograde into Capricorn, there'll still be some lingering effects from it in the summertime. So let's look at the map of the world. Let me just see them. And again, there has been a lot of earthquake activity lately and volcanic activity lately. And actually, I've been mentioning that. And actually, in some places I didn't expect to see. I actually did a lookup yesterday, and there were volcanoes. There was earthquake activity and volcanoes in Alaska, Canada. Tonga Islands is the best known, but I was actually surprised to see that because I was saying, well, it's not close to anything, nothing will happen there, and something did. So that interested me. But let me go to the time and space page, and I'm going to shut this down again. Hopefully this will come back up again, and we'll be able to share the page. My apologies for doing this so often, but I've been burned too many times with this. And time and space page change. Okay, so there was an earthquake in Turkey yesterday. So we have a Saturn line running through Turkey, which I should have seen. But again, it hit Istanbul, so the lines are a little bit off. Now, the lines over here, there's a potential for some kind of sea storm or volcanic activity to the west of Hawaii. That region is still active. And also some tsunami possibly right near Kauai in Hawaii. The other thing is southeast Alaska. And let's share and share the screen again. southeast Alaska, and the coast of Canada up through Washington State. Some potential of volcanic or earthquake activity. Sun's passing through California, Colorado, Nevada, excuse me, and Utah, I'm sorry, and Idaho and Montana. Well, okay. And so that part of the world will see a lot of more repressive activity on the part of governments. So Jupiter's passing through Mexico and um, up through North and South Dakota. Now, because Jupiter's in a nakshatra that's connected with deposed kings and rainfall, we can expect pretty strong rains and also a resurgence of people who've lost office or who've been censured. So it's actually interesting that so this isn't quite close to Arizona, but it's actually interesting that Kristen Sinema got censured by Arizona when the Jupiter line was so close to this. So Jupiter is, as a planet, it's about good things in general, but it's also to a certain extent about conformity. So if a person falls out of conformity, Jupiter tends to bring that person back into that conformist circle, or if they don't, then they get penalized for that. The line running down the center of the United States over here, or not the center, but the Great Lakes region, Michigan, through Missouri and Louisiana, is a Mars line. So we can expect some violence or some bad ecological activity there, unfortunately. It also goes through Mexico and down by Easter Island, but again, unless there's some kind of a volcano or something like, or some kind of a sea disaster down there, there's not much to interact with in that part of the world. The other thing we have right here is Venus alongside the moon. So this is going to be a rainy time for New York, and also kind of an emotional time for Washington, D.C. So there'll be a lot of criticism, a lot of name calling, which is not unusual for Washington, but it'll be more extreme. Also, like I said, attempts to revisit or attempts to censure people. Panama, again, is showing some activity. I have to look at Panama's chart individually to see why they're not getting hit harder. And this is, I believe, Colombia or Peru. And essentially this part of the world is showing, I think that's Bolivia, my apologies, is going to overgo some kind of political upheaval too. Mercury and Sun are, excuse me, I'm going to stop the share again, start up again. And Mercury and Sun are going through Brazil, so there'll be some problems with the government. The government exercising a lot of harsh control, and also through Uruguay and Paraguay. And Saturn is passing over eastern Brazil, so again, a lot of poor people, essentially not rebelling, but being controlled or being hushed by the government. So this region right here, looks pretty repressive. Um, we have a Mars line coming off Greenland, so we can expect some kind of nasty weather off of Greenland and down through looks like the Ivory Coast, I believe that is. And also Spain is experiencing a Venus line, so that's going to give some setbacks and disease matters. Moon is in the same line, looking for Rahu for political scandals. Oh, there's Rahu. Okay. So some political scandals in Iceland, maybe extending as far as to England. There was a recent political scandal about Boris Johnson's government, but it seems a little bit like old news right now. But the press won't let it go because Venus is England's right between Venus and Mercury. And there'll definitely be political scandals in Middle Europe, in Denmark, through Greece, down to Italy, down into Algeria, down into Egypt, and the Sudan, and down into Zimbabwe and Angola, and also even into Mozambique and Madagascar. Some sadness. I'm looking for some fear or anxiety in Turkey and in Eastern Europe. That's not unusual considering the fact that they had an earthquake there recently. And the economy is a bit slow there. That the economy really won't get much better in Turkey for another couple of years, but you'll see some slight signs of improvement over the next 6 months. And over here, we have Saudi Arabia and being what they would call hemmed in by malefics, by Rahu on one side and Saturn on the other side. So there'll be some problems with that particular country as well in terms of either oil production or civilian dissatisfaction. Rahu passes right through the Soviet or the former Soviet Union, excuse me. I'm slipping back into the past. And so you should see some disruption or some panic over there. There is a Jupiter line passing over the region, which is close to Kazakhstan and also close to the Ukraine. So I'm optimistic they'll be able to avoid a very significant conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. There's a Jupiter line running right through Iran, close to Kazakhstan, so that should help out Iran a little bit in terms of COVID, but it'll still be an issue for them over the next few years. And also, let's see, so that Rahu line ends up over here, not really touching anything after in the southern hemisphere. Let's see, we have Mars over Tibet, Bengal, and again, there's some potential for violence in India. I'm not wishing it upon India, but certainly between China, India, and maybe even Bangladesh here. And the moon is in Virgo, is in China. China's kind of isolated right now. It's sort of like doing its own thing, but interacting with some of the Southeast Asian economies, like like Vietnam and Thailand, and also um, Indonesia. And let's see now, Mercury's sun is passing over eastern China. So again, that feeling of being boxed in, the Chinese people being boxed and not being able to um, do anything about their situation. This is again, um, this is not a criticism of China, but basically, it's just flat out, it's 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 still pretty much a totalitarian state. So, so if there's any disagreement with the government or there's any disagreement with the general policy the general policy of the country, it's not going to be allowed, and there'll be a lot of conflict within this part, and also in Korea. Okay, so North Korea is going to have more suppression, but also South Korea. Finally, Japan has a Saturn line running through it. They experienced some bad activity, some volcanic activity, and some earthquake activity. And Australia has been panicking lately. They're currently on um, they're currently on lockdown. That'll be eased up a little bit, but there's still a lot of panic in Australia about what's happening. Um, the Prime Minister of New Zealand has said she will not impose new lockdowns. This line tends to indicate that that's true, but I think you'll start to see a lot more interest in. Um, so we don't have any Saturn lines in Western Europe, but a lot more interest in lockdowns and in um, penalizing people who don't get vaccinated, especially on the West Coast. It'll be true also in, let me see for a second. Also to a certain extent on the East Coast of the United States, but um, I'm optimistic that they won't go that far. The so the chart looks pretty interesting. Let's go to the individual signs. Spend a little bit too much time on that. Let me just go back here so I can get on this. And we'll try this. Okay, so this is gonna be really, really fast. Okay, so Aries, be careful about people essentially sneaking behind your back or trying to pull different things on you. Work life looks good, although it does seem like really high pressure. Supervisors will be basically nice, but expecting strong results, and friends will basically be good. But again, there is some intrigue behind the scenes. But Taurus, relationship life gets a little bit simpler, not quite as passionate as you'd like it to be. And relationship partners are probably spending more than you want them to. And also children are more moody, but basically not a bad week for you. For Gemini, relationships which seems to have been going backwards will all of a sudden switch forwards around the end of the week. They'll start to move positively again, and there'll be a change in location or home or even work location just for a brief while, maybe for 2 weeks. Um, Again, watch out for health issues, and there'll be some increased financial gains for the sign over the next week. For Cancer, relationship life is a bit of a challenge. There'll seem like a lot of responsibility for you over the next couple of weeks, and relationship partners will be optimistic though, but um, they'll also have to watch out for them being truthful with you about their romantic lives. Leo has Jupiter in the 7th house, which is good. So relationship opportunities open up. Money actually opens up quite a bit for the sign over the next week or so. And there'll be more financial growth for the sign. But again, some health problems, you'll have to slow down just a little bit. Fame and career. For Virgo, actually good for gains. People with this sign placement will have good financial rewards. Some anger or aggravation at home, but not really extraordinary, and some progress on the home front. Luck will be strong, but you'll have to work very hard for it. And again, just be aware of not irritating people in positions of authority. For Libra, Libra has Jupiter in the 5th house, K2 in the 2nd, so that they'll sometimes speak a little bit out of turn, but basically they're still a lucky placement. Venus and Mars. Venus is going to fulfill some ambitions that the sign has this following week. And home life will still be a little bit tough, more responsibility, but not as bad as it has been. For a Scorpio, K2's in the 1st house, Venus and Mars in the 2nd house. Better money for Scorpio this week. Sun and Mercury, Saturn. Whatever you want to do communicationally, go for it. And in terms of writing or publishing or speaking, it's a good time for that. There will still be a little bit of dissatisfaction with the relationship life, although finances will improve a lot. For Sagittarius, Venus and Mars are in the 1st house. This is a good placement for this chart. Venus rules the 6th house and the 11th house, so it should give financial gains. Mars rules the 5th and the 12th house. So again, there'll be equal losses and gains, but overall this sign will seem very energized, very aggressive, very willing to travel. And Sun's in the 2nd house with Mercury and Saturn. It'll give a good increase of money, but slowly through time. Jupiter's in the 3rd house, so again, politeness reigns here. And Rahu's in the 6th, some concern over illness, so that's pretty common in a lot of the charts we're seeing. Capricorn, Sun, Mercury, Saturn in the 1st house. These people will tend to be a little bit dictatorial or a little bit tough to deal with over the next few days. Just try to bear with it yourself and bear with it when you're dealing with other people. And they'll tend to have all the answers. Rahu's in the 5th house, so they'll be a little bit upset with their children or their charges. But overall, Venus and Mars are pretty good. Being in the 12th house, they'll enjoy time alone. They'll actually benefit from it. Aquarius has Jupiter in the 1st house. Overall, a lucky month, a lucky few months for Aquarius. Rahu's in the 4th. So it'll bring in financial growth for the sign, but also expenses connected with things like education and children, and also more self-confidence. And let's see, Moon is in the 8th house, so there'll be some temptation to engage in extramarital affairs. Ketu's in the 10th house, not a lot of acknowledgement of work done. And Mercury and Venus and Mars and Venus in the 11th house, good for gains. Finally, Pisces has Rahu in the 3rd. That'll make it very ambitious, as we said before. Moon in the 7th house. It does open the road for temptations for new relationships or for new partnerships. So it doesn't. So when I say relationships, to keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be a business relationship. And since the moon is in Virgo, that's more likely than romantic relationships. And as a matter of fact, the moon is in Hasta Nakshatra. It'll soon move to. So this will be about planning things out. It'll soon move to building things. So I think you're going to see a lot of projects connected with building start to really come together over the next couple of days. And finally, Venus and Mars are in the 10th house. Ketu's in the 9th house. Supervisors will be tough, or bosses will be tough. Venus and Mars are in the 10th house. Very good for career advancement, for general increase in wealth. And Sun, Mercury, and Saturn are in the 11th house. Not the best relationships with friends, but you'll achieve some financial gains. And finally, Jupiter's in the 12th house. Jupiter's in the 12th house. The Lord of the first and the 10th are ruled, so the person will be working behind the scenes more than out in the open. All right, that's it for this week. I hope the last part wasn't too frenetic, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you very much for tuning in the show. And I hope it's been educational. And I love every one of you. And thank you very much for watching. Again, if you would be so kind, please hit the subscribe button. It would really help me out. And I'd like to move on to other things on YouTube, God willing. And let's see if we can build a community. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a nice day, and namaste. A little too much. But I'm in that kind of a mood today. So, all right. Goodbye, everyone.